be going over the AP webinar demo that Laserfiche has, and we're very fortunate to have Christian Hughes, who's an account manager for Laserfiche, to actually do the presentation. So, Christian, I guess go ahead and take her away. And I guess everybody, if you could either mute or hold your questions, and then maybe we'll have a Q&A period at the end. Would that be great, Christian?
That works for me, if that's how you prefer things to be done.
Either way, whatever's comfortable for you.
If people have questions as we're going through things, I have no problem asking those as we do go through the presentation. Oftentimes, I find when we wait till the end, some people forget what they needed to ask, and they might not be the only one with that same question. So I don't mind being interrupted. In fact, I encourage it.
Okay, very good. All right, well, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and access the Laserfiche repository through a web browser, and that's going to bring me to a sign-in page. Now, the great part about Laserfiche is that you can use a Windows Active Directory to allow access to your Laserfiche repository, or you can have a Laserfiche-specific sign-in page. Regardless of which you choose, the security privileges do not change, and those actually boil down on a very granular level. You're going to be able to make sure that no one sees any information that you don't want out there for that individual, because each user can have different rights and privileges assigned to them by an administrator. So if I were to select any of these specific folders and I can simply right-click, I would be able to see some of the security settings associated with this folder. Now, within Laserfiche, we actually find it most efficient if when setting up security, we do it in groups. So that way a user is added to a group and inherits all of the rights and privileges of that group, unless an admin, again, comes in and removes a few of those. So you'll see here in this situation with this contracts folder, we have an administrators group, we have a group for contracts and vendor management and general users. And if we were to get into some of the rights associated there, it can be broken down between the ability just to browse through and read and see annotations, but also adding content into the system through deletions and modifications. All of that can be managed on a user by user or group basis. Now, if I were to go into any of these particular folders, it should seem fairly intuitive. Something that Laserfiche has tried to do is make sure that we've made this work in a similar fashion to other systems that you all have used. So that way we can allow you to easily adopt functions within the system so you can more easily manage your work from that first day you start using it, but also because we're aware that we don't want to rebuild the wheel. If you do that, you will probably end up failing. So if I were to go through to, let's say, a service agreement in our contracts folder, I can have it broken down by individual organization and then come to those various agreements. And if I were to select one of these documents, on the right side of the screen, we're actually going to have what's called our fields pane, and then our metadata and some other important aspects. So this is actually going to be, in my opinion, the most important part of your Laserfiche system, because fields allow you to make sure everything is properly indexed, and then from the point of being properly indexed, it allows you to easily and efficiently search for that information later on down the line. And the first aspect of your fields are going to be what we call a template. A template is a way to standardize the files that you are saving. Everything can be set on a easily configured template with as little or as much information associated with it as you'd like. So in this situation, for a contract, we have a contract document specific template. And with that template, we're able to designate a type, so whether that's a draft or maybe it's a supplemental document or an executed contract, and we're able to denote effective dates and expiration dates. But again, you could add or remove as many fields here as you would like, because this is information that you're going to be able to search under later on down the road. But in that same token, I'd be able to leave this folder. And let's say I started digging around in our finance folder. I'd then be able to come to checks. And if I expand this pane, you'll see that we have quite a number. And again, organizing your content is going to be something that you all find very crucial to your organization. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today. And we have these essential columns. And if I were to just right-click again, I'd actually have a column picker, so I can determine which columns I'd like to use. So for a check, I might be able to associate that with invoice numbers and vendor names and amount. But if I also wanted to add in there, when it was entered into our system, or if there is maybe certain signatures associated with it, or if I were to get into something very specific to checks, so maybe a check number or a date received, I'd be able to add those and sort through them. And selecting one, I'd then be able to see, again, I have an entirely new template here. In this situation, I've got my vendor name, invoice number, amount, check number, so on and so forth. And alongside those fields, I'm also going to have metadata. And the overarching concept still being that template, you then also have the ability to tag certain files. If, let's say for security purposes, you wanted to make sure those were blocked off to certain users, or if you were going through something like an audit, you could say to the group that was auditing you, hey, you're looking for this, we can tag those for you and hand them to you basically in a form of an electronic box, so that way they don't waste your time digging through your system to look through all of your files to find what they want. They're able to do that quickly and seamlessly, so that way you can be back up and running in a short period of time. Something that I think would be very applicable to you all is document linkage. And document linkage in this situation allows you to take any of your files and attach something that might not be in the same folder or subfolder series, and make sure that you can very easily find one when looking for the other. So something that's typically akin to a check might be something such as an invoice. So we've managed to link the invoice to this particular check so that we'd be able to open that up here. So if we found a check and wanted to see the invoice with it, we can simply click, and that invoice would then open up for us to view. And so now that we've seen this and opened it up, we'd even have the ability to perform a few actions, such as the ability to highlight. We have the ability to automatically redact information. So if I wanted to come in and do a manual redaction of information, such as, let's say, an order number, I could come in and perform that task. And even things such as annotations in the form of a sticky note, which is essentially our version of an electronic post-it note. Much like everything else in our system, this is going to be full text searchable because of our OCR capabilities. And now if I were to save the work that I've done in the same fashion that I had a fields pane and a metadata pane, I now have an annotations pane. And so here you'd be able to come in and see what annotations were performed, who did them, and when they occurred. But because these annotations are nothing more than an overlay, you actually have the ability to turn off those annotation displays So that way you can still see that the original integrity of this document has never been altered. I think I hear someone on the other end. Did someone have a question?
Do you want me to try to do it again?
No, it's already there in the system.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh,
Approve. Because once you're done with this one, you usually approve that, right?
yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
I think that was somebody. It was just some overflow dialogue there.
Okay. Well, then we'll just keep on pushing forward. So if I were to exit out of this document, then I'd come back into my repository, and there are a few other things I didn't have the ability to do. So if we were to get into something such as searching, so that way we can more easily find these documents instead of clicking through, we can leverage some of what we've done with our fields and metadata. Because outside of searching through document text and entry names and annotation text, which we talked about, we can come in and search through those fields. Because if I were just to do a quick search for checks, I'm going to generate a substantial sum there. But if I were to do an advanced search, I would be able to come in, and let's say out of the dozen different search types or so I have here, I wanted to do a field search. This will allow me to select a template, such as checks. I'd be able to take any of the associated information in those fields, and if I don't have all that information and I just have some, that's more than fine. And let's say I want to search for everything that is more than $5,000. That's been paid. I can run a search and see if I've done any business with an organization such as that. So I've managed to generate quite a few there. And so if we were to look at some of the information associated with this, I can see that this was, let's say, maybe over 13,000. I could come in and I could maybe revise my advanced search and compound that with something else. So if I wanted to add another search type there, I might be able to search for something that is linked to that. So then I'd also be able to pull up some of the invoices that are going to be provided there. So if I wanted to, using my column picker, differentiate between the actual checks and invoices, I would be able to do that here as well. I know it's been relatively silent. Did anyone have any questions? If not, then we'll get into some of the automation capabilities. So one of the great aspects of Laserfiche is that we have electronic forms as well as a workflow engine that work in tandem. So if I were to open up one of our electronic forms, in this situation, we're going to do a purchase order. And this is something much like your fields that you have the ability to easily construct. Our forms are built through simple drag and drop technology, so you don't have to worry about any coding or JavaScript or anything to that effect. And I would be able to come in and fill out this form. And let's say I needed a new office chair because the one I have doesn't provide the lumbar support I want. And I want to get some for the whole sales team. I'd then be able to provide a quick digital signature And we do integrate very well with things such as DocuSign, so that way you can make sure you have legally binding signatures in anything that you use. We can go ahead and submit this. So now that I've filled out that electronic form, all I need to do now is allow our workflow process and our workflow engine to run its course, and then the necessary individuals will be able to complete their task. Because as soon as we submitted that, an event kicked off a few processes. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go to what's called our forms inbox. So this is going to be a location where different tasks that need to be delegated can be found, whether you have it set up so that everyone can access it and see all of the tasks, or whether you have it so that certain individuals are automatically assigned a specific task, such as a manager approval. This is where they would come for that. So now that purchase order has been submitted, a manager can come into the forms dashboard, is what we refer to this as, and they'd be able to see that they had a task assigned to them. And so we can go ahead and open that up and see that it has information such as a date it was assigned and a due date. And you can even set up a priority level.
Awesome, thank you.
And if something isn't being done quite in time, or you're quickly approaching a due date, we can actually send an escalation of notifications to the person that this has been assigned to. And in the event it, for whatever reason, went to the wrong person, they have the ability to reassign that to a necessary party. So we can, as a manager, come through what the request is, leave our managerial signature, and then approve it. And it will go to the next person who needs to manage that. But some of you might not be interested in having to constantly come into an inbox to see if there's work that needs to be done for you. So while this is being pushed to our inbox here for our forms dashboard, there's also an email notification that was sent out. So as soon as we submitted that form, the manager, instead of having to sit in the forms inbox and refresh that page, had an email sent to them letting them know that someone had submitted a purchase order request, and this link that's attached here would take you directly to that form. So this is something that can be set up for you to be automated. And in that same fashion, as soon as we had that managerial approval, an email was sent out to our accounting department letting them know that they needed to review and create that corresponding purchase order. So they would be able to click that link and open that up in our forms dashboard as well. And so all those things can go on simultaneously. So now that we have come to the point of the purchase order, we can go ahead and pick a supplier. And one of the great aspects of our electronic forms is that they can do real-time database lookups. You just need to tell it where it's being directed. So if I were to pick a supplier that we commonly use, such as maybe Ace Technologies, and there's information associated with that in our system, such as setting up net terms or contact information for that supplier, it will automatically populate there. And then I can fill out what the purchase order is for. And designate a quantity. And Laserfiche actually has the ability to do some math for us in this process. So if I were to say each chair costs $1,200. Well, that's on the pricey side, I know, but we can come down and select that, and it was able to do our item subtotal, provide that tax, and calculate any other piece of information there. And because Laserfiche forms are dynamic, if something else had to be added to that order, I could simply add that same field there and provide the exact same process over again. And now we can create that purchase order. And so an interesting thing occurred when we submitted that purchase order. The reason that I made the price of those shares so high is to show that another step has the ability to be placed into a process such as this. And so in this particular process, any purchase orders that were created under $5,000 would automatically be sent out. However, because we exceeded that $5,000 threshold, it needed a CFO approval. So now a CFO can come into the dashboard or come in and see an email. And so if we were to go back and reference our email, they were now notified of that purchase order. But the CFO actually doesn't even have to go into the forms dashboard to approve this. Laserfiche has recently come out in our recent update of Laserfiche 10.3 with the ability to approve or deny, reject, okay, what have you, by simply typing in approve as a response or something to that effect, whatever you designate, in order to push things to the next step in a workflow. So he would never have actually had to click this open and task forms button and come back in here. But since we're here, we can just come down, we can approve it, and then see the last handful of steps in this process. So there are no more tasks that are going to be created with this. So we can exit out of our forms inbox. But the last few emails were now sent out associated with this process. All that occurred simultaneously because we do have parallel processing capabilities. So the individual who requested that purchase order be created for those shares is now sent an email where they can actually click and see a copy of that purchase order in the form of a shortcut. So they're seeing a shortcut version of that inside of the repository. So I can click on that, and if I sign in, I can now view that purchase order. And so I was able to generate that template of a purchase order. And then it's going to have the associated fields and metadata that need to be placed with it. And similarly, while that occurred, a PDF was generated in the form of a purchase order to send out to the company that we want to buy these chairs from.
She may be able to help you.
So now if we were to come back into our system, and let's say we were to go to our accounts payable section, you all might have an ERP system or a CRM system that you all want to use. So we can go to our order desk, that's going to be tied in with that. And we actually have the ability to see some of what's been done. So we can come in, let's say, go to our order details. And using a Laserfiche connector, we'd have the ability to open the purchase order associated with this particular order for Andrew Hall. And if you wanted to see some metrics on this process, we have the ability to use a few reporting tools that Laserfiche has built in with its forms and workflow processes to see just how efficiently we've been able to work. So if we wanted to look at different processes such as check processing or generating a purchase order, because what we just did was generate a purchase order. And we can come in and see that we had that one singular instance. We're able to see the day it occurred, whether it was active or terminated or completed, and see how it was initiated and the number of instances associated with that. And then we can also check out the workflow that was associated there. So we had to retrieve the Laserfiche forms content. We needed to get the vendor information. We needed to update the purchase order data. All of this that's a part of your business process can very easily be diagrammed out. In the same fashion, if we were to go to something like an invoice approval, we'd be able to see a much different workflow that starts when an invoice is received as opposed to when a form was submitted for a purchase order request. And then for maybe some internal analytics, we can come back into our forms dashboard. And I'm going to log out of the user that we've been operating with and log in as a forms administrator. And going to be able to grab some information. I apologize for that, I misclicked. Sorry, something slightly funky was going on there. Not quite sure why my computer wants to keep on running a search there, but if I were to, let's see if I can try this with the user that I was using before. I can go to our reports. And I can actually designate any specific process I want to generate reports on. Now, we had just done that AP process. And now I'm going to be able to see two different dashboards, one being our operational dashboard and the second being our performance dashboard. The difference being that our operational dashboard is able to show you information on every process that's currently in progress, while our performance dashboard will go in depth as to every process that has reached its end, whether it was completed or terminated. So you would be able to come in and see, the total number of processes you have in progress. In this situation, I'm not currently running any. However, I've completed one. You'd be able to see the different tasks that are in progress, whether they've been suspended or not. And you'd actually be able to see the distribution of that work amongst your users. So you can see who's bearing the heaviest load in your organization. And if we were to go to that performance dashboard, as I said, something that talks about those processes that have been completed, you can see we have that designated, and we have 0 canceled and 0 that have been terminated. We're able to get an idea of how long that took and seeing who spent how much time on each step. So if you have certain bottlenecks, you'd be able to identify those. And then you'd actually even be able to see the occurrence level of how many times these things are happening. So you'd be able to see how many people might request a purchase order to be generated versus how many of those actually reach a purchasing stage, as an example. Okay. And so that was all I intended to show today regarding, just a high-level overview of how a Laserfiche repository can be set up, and then show a process of how a accounts payable workflow might be set up. But I'm more than willing to field any questions at this time or show anything else regarding Laserfiche that you might like to see that I have the ability to do on this machine right now. So the floor is open.
Did you, Christian, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Did you have anything like on an invoice or anything, quick fieldy or anything like that? or not on that machine?
So if you want to get into data capture with an invoice using our advanced capture tool, being QuickFields, I have no problem showing that off right now.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
For those that aren't familiar with QuickFields, it is our ability to capture your data, whether it be from a paper document, any electronic document you have stored somewhere, or whether you need to reprocess something that you already have stored in Laserfiche. And you can do that by setting up what we call sessions. So based off of what you want scanned, you'd be able to set up a pre-configured session, much like everything else in Laserfiche, something very easily constructed, because we do have a wizard that's associated with building these that takes you step by step through everything. And you'd have the ability to come in and open up, let's say, an invoice session, because that would be relevant to you all. And it's going to want to pull certain information from any invoices that are scanned in. And so in this situation, I'm telling it to pull from a certain network folder. And so I'm going to start scanning everything that's in that folder. And once it's done scanning, it's actually going to be able to generate a few metrics for me on what it was able to do. So I was able to scan 3 pages, or 3 invoices, at a rate of about 42 pages a minute. And I actually can go down here and see those. So now in that middle screen, you'll be able to see the invoice that was just scanned. You'll see that we had an automatic stamping tool that lets us know when it was received. And if we were to scroll down on this invoice, you would be able to then now see in our field section different information that we wanted pulled from it, such as an invoice number, the supplier, the amount that's going to be associated with it. So if I were to scroll down and zoom in on what we had just scanned, you'll see that the total that we have that was scanned matches what was populated in the field. But for the first invoice that came in, there's an X on it. So we're missing some information. So I'll go ahead and zoom out. And we'll see that, okay, someone actually hand wrote in that piece of information there. So this allows you to still have some fail safes. So we weren't able to get that purchase order number, but we can come in and manually type that in and then have that submitted into our system. And once all that's done, we can now save that into the repository into a designated folder of your choosing. And there are a handful of tools that we have at our disposal to make that process so easy. So if you're working with things such as paper files, you want to make sure that you have the ability to automatically rotate or de-skew something, because you don't want to have someone wasting time making sure that everything you load up on a scanner is placed at the perfect right 90-degree angle, so that you have the ability to accurately capture your information. So whether we have to do some form of alignment or extraction, we can do that. But then we can get into some of our image enhancement tools, because when trying to capture data, the most important thing is that you have a clear image, so that way you can get the most accurate data extraction. So we provided tools such as the ability to despeckle your image, or things like color removal, or even smoothing out that page for clear text. And then we can get into some of the processes to actually extract that information for use inside your repository. So we do have optical character recognition, otherwise known as OCR, to make sure that everything can be scanned and made full text searchable as it enters your system. But if you need to reference things such as barcodes, as an example, we have the ability to ID those and reference that back to a database. Or we can do things like pattern matching. So if they're certain alphanumerical patterns that you need to be grabbed, you can set that up. One example that is often cited is with social security numbers. So a social security number has the same standard convention every time, and that is 3 digits, a dash, 2 digits, a dash, and then 4 digits.
And let's go ahead and click on the R in the top left once we do that, and it'll take us back to that main page. Now,
Hello?
the first items that we're going to go over today, the first section this morning that will probably take us basically up to lunch is
Hello, are we getting some bleed over from somebody?
Well, I apologize for whoever I might have been interrupting, but just to quickly wrap up what I was saying, there are a number of tools to your advantage here, whether you need to permanently stamp something before it enters your system, or whether you want some automated redactions to occur. We have the ability to set that up for you, whether it be with your invoices or maybe purchase orders that are being sent to you, checks that you need to process, you need to grab information off of those as they're stored into your system. We have the ability to very easily manage all of that for you here at Laserfiche when we partner with our resellers such as Unity. So I know we've gone over a lot between what you can do with the document in the repository, search functionality, our electronic forms, and our workflow engine, as well as our actual data capture tool that we see before us right now. Does anyone have any questions about any of the things that we went over? Or if not something we went over, something that you hope Laserfiche might have the ability to show that I might not have depicted for you?
Somebody mentioned, Christian, they'd like to see the rest of the invoice processing. I don't know, do you have any kind of workflow for that, or?
Yeah, so
that's just through the regular workflow, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I wanted to now have all of these saved into our system, which I've done, I now have the ability to come in back into our system. And if I were to go to something such as our repository and find any of those invoices, we can see what we have the ability to do with them. So if I wanted to just very quickly grab an invoice, I can do an invoice search. And I'm able to grab an invoice from, again, Ace Technologies. And you have the ability to, within documents, as an example, change their status. So it can come in as received, and if there's any data correction that needs to occur, you can move it to that phase. And let's say it needs to be rejected or approved, you have the ability to select those, and if you save it, it will kick off the next part of that workflow that might be associated with it. Currently on this machine, I don't have a work or an invoice process built out that I can put on display, because I don't have the ability to generate any invoices through any electronic form. But if I were to show you all the steps that this went through, starting at the bottom, and I can view the full history of anything that goes through a process. We can have an invoice that was received and a purchase order number being validated, as well as a data validation, an invoice approval, payment. I'm able to see how long that all of those took, and any other information. So let's say there's a holdup and you need a resolution. You can leave full comments on that, and then see how long that entire process takes for this document, and then the average for all in your system. If anyone is interested in actually seeing how their invoices have the ability to work in this fashion, what we can actually do is have Laserfiche build a proof of concept demonstration for you. So if you reach out to us here, our pre-sales engineers would be able to, using some of your sample documents, if you would be kind enough to provide those for us, place them in a mock system and run them through an invoice process that you have. So if you could just explain how your internal process goes, they'd be able to do that within Laserfiche for you. So if that is something that any of you are interested in, we have the ability to do that for you.
So, Holly, I know your question. I hope that helped a little bit. But once the invoices are in Laserfiche, then the field change is sort of acting as your sort of step process. Is that kind of correct? And then the business process is set up to actually track the history.
Yeah,
we're mainly
I'm sorry, was that?
This is Holly.
Hi, Holly.
Hey, Holly.
Yeah, we're mainly, we have issues with the whole approval process because we're doing them paper now. So trying to figure out a way we can throw all of the invoices into here, send them out to whoever needs to get the approval and them to get back, because the paper trails obviously are getting lost or duplicated, so that's kind of what we're looking for.
So what I did just now is actually open up my workflow designer. So you can see all the different workflows that I have. So let's say you wanted to see the invoice approval workflow or an invoice rejected workflow, whichever we ultimately want. I can now view that, and you can see the workflow as it's built out here. So an invoice can be received and generate maybe access to the URL that is going to occur because you all probably want to use our web access platform. And so you can get that information through two ways, whether that being our import agent. So if it goes to a particular file or email account, what have you, our import agent tool can grab that, run it through a process of pattern matching, assigning field values, putting things like a verifying invoice number together to make sure that can be saved in your system. Or we can run through a quick fields process like we did with the invoice when I opened up that application. And then we can retrieve the details on it and then place it in a record series. So that way you can manage a retention schedule on it or make sure it's just permanently archived. And then you can see all the subsequent steps that follow that are going to be outlined here. And we've been able to account for certain things, such as whether a purchase order was missing or whether a purchase order had been found, and continue through this whole process.
So Holly, are you using any workflows at all right now?
Not for invoicing. So we don't have any
Okay.
of our AP type stuff in there. We do
Okay.
checks and run our checks, but we don't have any type of invoicing. But it's more the approval type process because they come in one place here and then they go out to the departments and come back.
Yeah, there's a number of ways that you could do that, and if you want to reach out to maybe Jeremy or something and talk to you about that, but you can do it through secure field changes. The DocuSign that Christian mentioned earlier also is a very legalistic way of doing that.
Yeah, with
So
the approvers all need the Laserfiche access.
In this case, yes, they would. Yeah, they'd have to have like a full license or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you did it in forms, through forms, then you could be maybe a foreign participant or something of that nature to go through the approval that way. Does anybody else have any other questions? No, I guess that might be it. Christian?
Okay, well, for everyone that's still on the line, I just want to thank you for your time today. I really do appreciate you sitting through this with me today and allowing me to share you how Laserfiche might be able to be effective. How Laserfiche is able to be effective in your organization.
Well, thank you. That was a very thorough demonstration, Christian. Appreciate it. All right. Any other last? I guess we'll go ahead and close this off, and if there's no other questions.
Okay. Well, you all have a great day.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.